Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Kashif Khan. He's the CEO and founder of the DNA Company, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of health biohacks. He's kind of the expert researcher, has a company, has studied this. I've heard him on other podcasts. I've watched him on other shows. He's the man when it comes to DNA and knowing and understanding it. And so we're going to get into today, what is DNA and why does it matter and how can we use it effectively in our lives? But welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Good to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So first of all, just give us a high-level view or high-level overview of what is the DNA Company. Just kind of a 30,000 foot view. You're the CEO, you're the founder, but what is the DNA Company? I think that'll help with our conversation.
Yeah, so what we found, and this came to me personally because I don't come from this space, first of all. I'm not a PhD researcher, scientist, doctor. I came from the startup world, so I used to help companies grow, and I got super sick. So I'm 42 years old now. When I was 38, I had 5 different conditions and 5 different doctors and 5 different pills. And the question I kept asking was why? Like, why are these things happening? And it was through my discovery, my own genome, that I started to learn that there were certain pieces broken, certain code that was spelt wrong, certain functions biologically that weren't happening properly. And this is why at that age, with a combination of my environment, I started to express all these problems. And that's why the DNA Company was formed. I literally, when I learned that I could heal myself and that illness was truly optional, that it wasn't something I had, it was something that I did wrong that led to, I walked away from what I was doing and I started funding the research. We built a team. And the DNA Company now, to answer your very first question, is an interpretation engine. We take what's known about genes that are published through medical publications all over the world, and we make it easy and accessible for the average person, like myself. How do I now read my genome report, apply it, and know exactly what to do? What do I eat? How do I exercise? Why can't I sleep at night? The things and choices we have to make every day, we've sort of unlocked that so the average everyday person can just do it and be the optimal version of themselves.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And such a succinct description of what you're doing there. What were you? You said you had 5 different disorders. What was going on with you?
I had eczema so bad that I couldn't open my left eye. It was literally like sealed shut, and I always had this white screen walking into meetings looking like, these things were all rooted in one central hub. So I had eczema, I had psoriasis on my knuckles. When I would clasp my hand, my knuckles would bleed because it was so chapped up and dry. I had migraines so bad that my business partner would have to drive me home, and I'd tell him to stop because I'd vomit out the door from the pain. The only way to get rid of the pain is a gut-brain connection. I would literally vomit, and that would give me like half an hour relief, and then it would start again. So what ended up happening was, in the office that I was in, downstairs, there was a manufacturing company that was putting some chemical pollutants into the into the vents, the ventilation system. And
oh my gosh.
So that sounds horrible, right? But it was only me that got
Yeah,
sick.
that sounds really bad.
Yeah, there was a dozen people. Yeah, there's a dozen people in the office. I'm the only person that expresses any problem because there's a process in your body called glutathionization. So we all know that when you drink alcohol, your liver clears it and gets rid of it for you. But it does that with everything else too, with mold, with chemicals, with heavy metals that are on your food, all the things that are not supposed to be in your blood. Glutathione binds onto it, sends it to your liver, gets it out. The genes that instruct that process, I don't even have. So forget about what version or how well I do it. I don't do it. So I was breathing in this stuff day after day, and it just wasn't leaving my body, which led to crazy inflammation, which led to all these inflammatory problems of migraines, eczema, psoriasis, which is more autoimmune, depression, and it was when I fixed this central hub, I replaced my ability with supplementation and the right foods, and the problem started to go away. All the spokes that were coming out of the hub started to go away. It's been 4 years. I don't have a problem, right? Where I was sick all the time, I don't have a problem now.
And so when you were sick, you went, sounds like, to conventional doctors and got,
Yeah.
I'm sure, pills, potions, and lotions, right? You were rubbing
Yeah.
stuff on your hands. You were probably taking some type of, right?
Yes.
You're taking some type of medicine, I'm sure. And so help me understand. And I think a lot of people are like high blood pressure medicine, anxiety medicine. I mean, there's a reason that the pharmaceutical companies are these huge behemoths because they make tons of money, and how they make tons of money by selling pills. So how did you go from, what was your mindset, you know, from I'm on these pills and I'm taking this stuff that's probably having marginal effects? What did you do
Mhm.
next? I guess how did that link? How did you get linked over
Yeah.
to DNA? I missed. I think
So
I haven't put that
so
together yet.
that behemoth, it's healthcare is a $4 trillion industry in the United States. 90% of that is chronic disease, meaning things that you don't have, that you're not born with, that happen over time because you did something wrong. And I started to learn that the reason, my question was why? The
Hmm.
five different doctors for five different problems. Why is this happening? Did I eat something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Logically, like everything all at once. But the answer was not resolving the why. It was the what. You have this problem, this problem, this problem. So you need this pill, this pill, this pill. Right. So
And at this point, you still didn't know that you were being basically poisoned through the air ducts. Is that accurate, or did you know at
I
that
still
point?
didn't know. Yeah, I still didn't know.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the way we look at the genome, and I discovered through my own genome that there was literally certain genes missing, certain genes that didn't function so well. And how did I get there? Was through
Hmm.
searching, just like anyone else that can't get their problem solved. You go online, you start to look, and then you find podcasts, and you find interviews, and you find functional medicine doctors that are telling stories. You're like, that's
Hmm.
me. I'm that guy that just
Right.
can't get figured out. I did find a clinician in Toronto where I am who was doing some research on
Hmm.
genetics, and I started to work with him. And that's when I discovered these gaps and holes and big red flags, and I was able to plug those as opposed to masking the symptom, right? As opposed to saying, how do I
Hmm.
treat my eczema? It was, how do I replace the biological function I don't do? And it's three buckets.
Mm.
It's environment, nutrition, lifestyle. Environment
Yep.
is everything that's around you that you breathe, that you're exposed to. Nutrition,
Hmm.
supplements, food, etc. Lifestyle is how do I sleep, how do I exercise, everything that I do while I'm awake. And it's with these three buckets
Right.
that I healed myself. And why is that important? Because you can't put this in a pill, and you wonder why it isn't offered to anybody, right?
Hmm.
So the problem of a chronic disease is an amazing business because it never heals. You're just treating it for the rest of your
Right.
life. The
That's
American average is by the
right.
age of 50, you have two. Sorry, by the age of 50, you have a disease. By the age of 60, you have two. You spend the last 15 years of your life in treatment. 66% of American personal bankruptcies are based on healthcare costs. So
Really?
there's,
Wow.
yeah, here, 66% of personal bankruptcies. It's like
Hmm.
18% of GDP we're spending on trying to stay alive.
Hmm.
When most of these things we're paying for, 90% according to the CDC, don't have to happen. They are all choices we made that are misaligned to our genetic capacity. We are wired to do A and we're doing B, and all of a sudden you get sick. It's like, I have a Ferrari, great. What if I take it off roading? It's not going to work out that well,
Right.
right? I can
Hmm.
take my SUV onto the track and race against a Ferrari. What are you built for? What did your ancestors do? What genetic legacy did you inherit? And what are you now doing? And for most of us, most of us, that's misaligned.
And so we have a lot of varied guests that come on the show, and we talk about, diet, exercise, the thing you're talking about, supplementation, lifestyle, food, and I think from, at least in my view, it's kind of like, well, we should all exercise, we should all get enough
Yeah.
sleep, we should all do these things, and those are kind of general things. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that's all good, and we need to do those. But if we're kind of doing them in the dark, is that accurate to say?
Yes.
We're
Yep.
kind of
Those
like
are-
throwing, it's kind of like we're playing darts and we shut our eyes and we're just throwing darts when we hope we're hitting the board. And there's got to be some general things, I think, like enough sleep and some stuff, but
yes.
that may not be. And I think probably for a lot of people, that's probably not enough to get them the results, the true health results, right?
Everyone hits a plateau. Everyone has something that doesn't work. And it's two buckets. And you said it already. It's trial and error, just going through stuff to
Hmm.
figure out what works, and the pain of figuring out what actually may make you feel worse before you get to something that makes you feel better. And then one size fits all. Somebody figures out something that works for them, and they're now a guru that makes everybody do it, and it may be working on 6 out of 10 people, right? So what's
Mm-hmm.
actually going on is we all have symptomatically similar problems, but the reason we had that problem is different. Let's dive into something like weight loss, right?
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
caloric restriction,
Huge.
stop eating, exercise, burn
Right.
fat. What type of exercise should you be doing? There's some people for whom, if you put yourself through heavy cardiovascular activity, you're going to have a cardiovascular disease. Completely counterintuitive. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because you see these soccer players and Olympic sprinters that drop dead of 35 of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's this phenomenon where best training, best fitness, best everything, zero previous
Right.
symptoms. Why did that person who's an elite human drop dead at 35 of a heart attack? Because some
Mm-hmm.
people, way more than you think, we can determine genetically what quality hardware you have. So if you have the arteries around the heart, which is where most heart disease happens, if you have the not so good quality hardware, it's much more prone to inflammation, right? So that's one. We'll park that for a second. So you have bad
Mm-hmm.
hardware. If you live in Aruba and eat fish out of the sea and have zero stress, it doesn't mean anything, right? You still have to have the
Right.
raw environment, nutrition, lifestyle load. So now take that bad hardware and put it into an Olympic sprinter who trains high intensity cardiovascular training day after day after day after day after day. They've compressed 70 years of work into a decade. There's a
Mm-hmm.
gene called SAW2, which determines how well you clear oxidation, meaning when you breathe, you take in oxygen and
Mm-hmm.
you combine that with nutrition to create energy through your cells. In that process, you create an oxidant. So the oxygen that gives you life is slowly killing you by giving you an oxidant. That's the byproduct. It's like the smoke of
Mm.
burning the fuel.
Got
Some
it.
people don't efficiently remove that smoke. And so that would be the source of the inflammation layered on top of the bad cardiovascular hardware they have that is prone to inflammation, right? So they have the bad hardware,
Mm-hmm.
genetic red flag, bad or misaligned choice. I do cardiovascular exercise, causing the inflammation. The body's response to inflammation here in the arteries is to actually send cholesterol as a hormone to reduce the inflammation. And that's why people get cholesterolemia. That's why Lipitor is the number one prescribed drug, to reduce your
Mm-hmm.
cholesterol, because so many people have this, the bad hardware, the missing detox genes, the bad oxidation, the wrong exercise choices, the wrong sleep choices, etc., etc., etc. So you name a problem, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
weight, autism, breast cancer, all of these things that we're worried about. Yes, there's this general rule of thumb, but it's working on 5 or 6 out of 10 people. We need to figure out how do you get it to 10 out of 10, and that's what we can do with genetics.
Right.
Is your why? Why did it happen to you? And your why is not the same as somebody else's why.
And so, to help me make the leap from, okay, so I take a DNA test, and I know everybody's heard of probably 23andMe and
Right.
Ancestry.com and some of those. That's not what that's a genetic test. That's not what we're necessarily talking about here. We're looking at different things than what that, I mean, that test is telling me where I came from. This is telling me how my genes express. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so there's three things. Where you came from is ancestry, right? And that's more a
Mm-hmm.
data collection tool than it is the real customer is the person in the back end buying the
Right.
data. It's designed for them, right? And that's why this
Mm-hmm.
recreational message
Mm-hmm.
of I'll tell you about your uncle in Nigeria, right? That's that entertainment that you
Right.
want, right? So that's
Right.
one. Then there's genetic traits. So geneticists actually believe that genetics only will deal with genetic problems, things that you're born with, rare genetic
Mm.
conditions, and
Mm-hmm.
things like 23 that you mentioned. Identify those, the needle in the haystack, that gene that's broken and not working. That's a tiny
Mm.
fraction of our problems. 90%, like we said, is chronic disease, the big ones: cancer,
Mm-hmm.
cardiovascular, diabetes, mood and behavior
Right.
issues. We can dive into that, weight, hormones. These are the areas where they're very gray. We never ask and are not told why they happened. We just know that around
Mm.
the age 50, you're going to roll the dice and see which one you got. You're going to get
Right.
one of them. You just don't know which one, because
Mm-hmm.
we're all misaligned to our what we're designed for, and we just don't know which part of our body is failing and is going to express the disease first, right? So
Mm.
that bucket is where we're saying that's a sandbox we play in. And the only reason we're able to do this, by the way, is we realized the gap in research was that geneticists study DNA, clinicians study people. Nobody brought the two
Mm-hmm.
together. So we spent 3 years studying 7,000 people, one by one by one, hours and hours and hours, tracking their environment, tracking their nutrition, understanding their healthcare history to understand if you are in this, you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's bucket. I'm also telling you you're in a 20% chance of not getting Alzheimer's bucket with the same
Right.
information. What were these two people doing differently? We know that you have a red flag. There's something you don't do well. What did the 20% do right that even though they had the
Mm-hmm.
genetic risk, they didn't get sick? That's
Right.
what we've learned and what we can now teach.
Right. And, I'm familiar with Dale Bredesen's work out of UCLA.
He's amazing.
I think it's UCLA. Yeah. And actually, we're looking at implementing some of his stuff. I involved in some senior care communities. And so we're going to implement some of Bredesen through a partnership with Heather Sanderson, who's been on the show. We're looking at doing some Bredesen protocol with some of the seniors that we have in our dementia units.
Cool.
And from all of that, we know that a lot of it is what is it, 32, I think, different indicators that we deal with in the Bredesen protocol. But basically, it's environment, supplementation, lifestyle, right? But then how is it? Are there tweaks? And so we'll be doing testing and blood work and different stuff to figure out the supplementation stuff. But are there when I look at Bredesen's work, it's all about the things that we're talking about, which is if you're predisposed for it genetically, there are things that you can do so that you still don't have to experience it in this physical reality, right? It's
For
just
sure, yeah.
because to your point that you have it on your DNA, figure out if you're predisposed for it so that you can even be more proactive than just
Meant.
rolling
Yeah.
the dice, right?
So our team has worked with both Dale Bredesen and Heather Sanderson, just coincidentally. She had a summit.
Is that right?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah. So there's a gentleman
Oh
on our team.
yeah. They just did their summit. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the summit and it was awesome. They really killed it. They really taught a lot of people a lot of things they need to know. So we were on there talking about the genetics of cognitive decline. And
Yes.
part of our research was, and we've been talking back and forth with Heather about this stuff, which is that it's again not the same reason for everybody. These guys are doing
Right.
an amazing job of the therapeutic side. How do we fix it? And a better job than most,
Right.
I would say. So it's not just you have
Yeah,
this,
definitely.
too bad, right? It's actually reversible. So why is it reversible? So 68% of cognitive decline now is now airborne, meaning that the air that we breathe is so polluted, and we're mostly in cities, and we're just living longer, right? Why is dementia and Alzheimer's going up? We haven't changed. We're just living an extra.
Right.
We used to, in the 1950s, you'd be 50. Now we're living to 100, right? So sorry, I shouldn't say 1950s, more the turn of the century. So now we're living down. So we more exposure. So what are those exposures? If you're breathing in the wrong chemicals that are entering your bloodstream, they're causing inflammation. And if you're like me and you can't detoxify them, you're much more prone to neurological inflammation, which leads to cognitive decline, which is one of the paths to dementia and Alzheimer's.
Right.
Some people don't detox in their gut. There's a gene called GSTM1, which I'm missing, by the way. I don't have that one either. So the ability to have a first line of defense to block toxins that are coming along with your food from entering your bloodstream and causing like a gut dysbiosis, chipping away at the walls of your stomach. And if you're like me and you don't know that and you're eating the wrong things, then eventually you get a leaky gut. And after getting a leaky gut, you eventually get a leaky brain because our DNA is 200,000 years old. We are not wired like grandma. We are wired like go way, way back. Your ancestors are 200,000 years old. Our DNA hasn't changed since then. So imagine the current reality of industrialization, pollution, food, etc. The blip in time versus 200,000 years. This is why everyone's so sick. So again, leaky gut, leaky brain. All of a sudden, toxic substrates can directly enter your brain, cause cognitive decline. Then there's things like starch metabolization. We know the gene that actually converts starch to glucose to turn it into fuel. If you don't have the good version of that, you're gonna if you live long enough, it's gonna lead to cognitive decline. We also know the gene that deals with your insulin response. And if you don't have the good version of that, the combination of that and the starch gene is going to lead to cognitive decline. So it's again, we know it's a much bigger problem, especially in women. 80% of the cases are actually in women. Why? And let me answer that question. Why is it that the majority of cognitive decline cases are in women? Why is it that I think it's 62% of women will die on their first cardiovascular event? with zero previous warning signs, zero previous symptoms, and men, it's a tiny fraction because women also have to deal with estrogen toxicity that men don't.
Mm.
And if you do as a man, it's very little in terms of its impact versus a woman, which means some women, and we can determine this genetically, just convert their estrogen into a toxic byproduct, which again is another source of inflammation, which is
Right.
why cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, all these later in your life problems are much worse for women.
Interesting. If we know genetically what we're predisposed for, or what in your case, what you're saying is stuff that you just literally don't have those genes, which I didn't even, my brain hadn't even thought like that. It was kind of like, variations, but you're saying there's literally some genes some people just don't have, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And so so you know that you don't have, so in your case, I guess let's just take you. So in your case, when you knew you didn't have some of these genes that could naturally detox you, then what was the antidote? What did you have to do once you
Right.
discovered you didn't have that gene?
So there's really two dials you can turn. So a gene, what is a gene? It's an instruction. It tells your cells what to do. And different cells know which page of the instruction manual to read. A heart cell only reads the heart page, and that's why it looks like a heart cell. Right? So when you're missing the page and you don't have the instruction, that you're not doing the job. So there's two things you can do. You either reduce the load of whatever that job is supposed to work on, and if it's detox, then you have to not golf 4 days a week and breathe in toxic pesticides from that golf course, right? You have to not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I heard you mention. I heard you mention this on another show, and I've got another really good friend of mine who's a doctor in California, and we were having a conversation once, and he said, "Do you know that golf courses are the most toxic as far as land development and being land outside of cemeteries? Because just literally, obviously, if you have literally bodies laying in the ground." He said the golf course is the next most toxic piece of ground that you can have. And at the time I was a golfer, and I was like, what? And then he was kind of explaining to me. And I remember as a golfer, when I played golf, I don't anymore, but you'd pick up the tee and you just pop it in your mouth. Right. And you're picking up a tee and I remember hearing about people getting like mouth cancer and sores and right over time, because they're literally putting that fertilizer that they've treated the ground with right in their system, right? It was going right in my bloodstream at that point. So even though you're out there outside and you think, oh, it's out and I'm in the fresh air and I'm, getting some exercise because I'm walking for 3 hours, you're walking in a toxic field, basically. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and especially if you're in a jurisdiction where there's a longer winter, where there's a lot more effort required to maintain the beauty during the summer. Like especially in Canada, by the way, where I am, the laws are a lot more lax because they just need it. In order to have a beautiful golf course, you have to be able to move quick within that little window of sunshine that we have, right? Depending what city you're in. So
right.
It's just a lot more toxic and it makes you sick. So I have a friend who had a crazy cholesterol issue at the age of 38. And the solution, the cure, the problem for him was he was literally golfing 4 days a week. He was a semi-retired pharmacist. He did really well with his pharmacy and just didn't like work. So he golfed 4 days a week during the season, squeezing in what he could. And that's what causes cholesterol issue, because he had the thing that I talked about earlier, the bad quality hardware, the bad detox capacity like me. He also, there's a process called methylation, which fights inflammation. He also didn't do that well.
Okay.
So the inflammation being caused by the lack of detox and the bad hardware, he also didn't do the job of reducing the inflammation. So there was no fire extinguisher in his system. The fire just blazed. And so all of a sudden at the age of 38, he's on Lipitor that just kept increasing every month, and he didn't know why. As a pharmacist, couldn't figure it out. And we got to the root, and this was it, is that he was golfing 4 days a week, and he was playing tennis 3 days a week. So he was getting the toxins from the outside, and he was producing the oxidants from the inside. So this double whammy of inflammatory insult. And he was a unique male that is estrogen dominant. Your hormone pathway can lead you in many places. So he also had estrogen toxicity to deal with.
So even though I bet he thought he was like doing everything right too, right? I
Yeah,
mean, here I
yeah,
am.
he's like, "I
I'm
exercise like
I'm
every
walking.
other."
I'm outside. I'm
Yeah,
getting fresh air. I'm exercising. I'm being very active. I'm playing tennis on the off days. That's good for cardiovascular. I'm working my. So I mean, from a just a logical standpoint, he must have thought, "Gosh, I'm just killing it, or not killing it, but I'm living a healthy life." And he was killing himself, literally.
he was slowly killing himself. 38, and he was on Lipitor with the dose increasing every time he went to check because it just kept going up and up and up and up. So, so that's where the difference between masking the symptom. We go to the doctor because something's broken, and then all the doctor can do is checkbox. I got rid of the thing you're complaining about. That's my job, right? Versus
Right.
why did it happen? We don't ask that question because they don't have the toolkit. It's not they're not trained on that. That their toolkit is acute. Respond to the problem, right? They're not looking for the
Mm-hmm.
system failure. There's some great functional doctors out there, people like Dale, people like Heather Sanderson, that they are doing that
Mm-hmm.
work, but it's hard to find.
Yep. And I think there's more and more doctors or more and more people going into that space because it's making more and more sense. And people are kind of, I think, waking up to, just like you did. It's like, well, why at such a young age am I experiencing such horrible health issues when I'm not doing anything that's, I'm not
Yep.
freebasing crack or I'm not, I mean, I'm not doing like really stupid stuff. So why am I
Yeah.
having these health issues? And I think you have to look at functional medicine if you want to, if that's the right term that we want to use. But functional medicine, this isn't a sales show for getting DNA tested. This was just this. You're the expert on DNA, and so part of it is you have to understand your own DNA, right? Because it's personal to everybody. It's not a one size fits all. So I have to get tested in order for me to understand how what the instruction manual is for how the vehicle that I bought drives. Is that a simplistic way
Yeah,
of looking at it?
essentially, there's things that can be. We've seen so many people now that there's certain problems that we already know what's going on. We've seen it over and over and over and over again, especially with things like mood and behavior in the brain and what's really happening. But yeah, I mean, you read your car's manual, you read your TV's manual before you put it all together. You even look at the Lego book with your kids before you
Oh
start
yeah, yeah,
assembling
yeah.
the pictures, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
if you had a human instruction manual that told you exactly that GPS that's telling you what detour to take to avoid that problem that's coming, take the detour. Add 10 years to your life, add 15 years to your life. And it's not just adding years, it's also adding life to those years, meaning that
Right.
quality, there's no point living to 100 if you're in a hospital bed for 25 years, right? It's
Right.
like, how do I have the same vitality youth? How do I carry forward how I felt when I was 25 into my 90s? And that is possible, by the way. We do this with people all the time. I'll use myself as an example. When we started this journey, I did an internal biological age test, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
a test that, through what's called aortic stiffness, tries to determine how much you've aged yourself internally, which gives you some
Mm-hmm.
sense of longevity. So I was 38 when we started this process, and my biological age was 43 because I had a lot of crazy inflammation. I've
Right.
got issues, brain issues, all sorts of stuff. I'm now 42. We're 4 years into this research we've been doing, and my biological age is now 33.
Oh,
Right.
nice.
So,
Oh,
yeah, I went from 5 years older to almost 10 years younger. So it's
right.
very
So you've
easy to
actually
reverse.
reversed it.
Yep.
And so in this case, because I like to get into like specifically what exactly. So do we get a kit? We do a swab. We do blood
Oh, sure.
work. What in your can I guess with your DNA? So what do we actually do with the test that you guys use?
Yeah, they're all the same wherever you get them from. It's you order it, you get shipped a kit, which is a saliva tube. You're literally
Right.
just spitting in a tube,
Oh,
right?
spitting. Yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
you seal it. It comes back. It then goes to the lab, and the lab extracts the DNA from the saliva. So the actual
Uh
genetic
huh.
code is extracted. There's a tool to do that. Then there's three different processing steps, and this is one thing that we uniquely do. So most genetic testing companies are a data selling business, meaning they want to extract the maximum amount of bulk data to sell to a pharma company. That's why the front end product doesn't work on things like chronic disease and aging. It works on just rare traits. So we do three separate sequences, which is, let's look at that bulk data to find the needle in the haystack, but let's also look at the minutia of are you missing the gene? That's a whole other test you have to run
Right.
that they don't do, right? Are you missing
Okay.
certain paragraphs or code within the gene? That's a whole other test you have to do. So it's more comprehensive. but it's the only way that you can truly glean from that sample all of the stuff we're talking about, all the big problems, right? And then when it's all done, you're simply logging into a portal, and it's designed to be easy to use, meaning I'm looking up things like addiction and depression and anxiety, or keto diet, or hair or skin, and understanding what my body does with that stuff. So we provide it interpreted as opposed to a bunch of data, which is you got the AA version of the DRD2 gene. What does that mean? Right?
Right.
Versus
Exactly.
you
Right.
are more prone towards addiction or reward seeking behavior. And if you don't have something to strive towards, you're probably going to be depressed.
Right.
Right. So the insight, that's what people actually need.
Right. Exactly. And so this comes in, you said it's in a portal, so you log onto the portal and then you get kind of your unique instruction manual, if that's
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can then you can that you can access. Is it proactive enough that it like gives me the top 10, or is it something that I say, okay, I'm concerned about this, or I mean, how does it?
So the journey kind of looks like, people still want that, tell me about my results. That the clinician
Yes.
experience of some
Yes,
doctor
that's what I'm
telling you,
saying. Yes,
right?
right.
So what we
Hmm.
did
Hmm.
was we understood that the way we think about DNA is so different that when we went and tried to hire genetic coaches to scale that, here's a coach that will tell you something, it didn't work because they
Right.
don't think the way we think. They're looking for that rare variant, right? So we
Hmm.
instead built an AI platform that gives you this personalized podcast. So when you go into your portal, there's a whole section that's a podcast that's built for you that's telling you about your genome, right? So it's telling you comp gene, you have this version, which means this, and you may behave like this. This stuff may make you feel like this, and if you do this, you're going to feel a lot better. And it does that for
Okay,
all the.
so it's prescriptive,
It's
right?
prescriptive, yeah. And then, so that's
Right.
the podcast. Then there's the actual reports, which are let's look up things like anxiety and cardiovascular health and diabetes, etc., and understand how I sort of am faring in those areas. And there's recommendations that we worked with an amazing guy, Dr. BJ Fogg. He wrote the book Tiny Habits. He runs the Stanford University Behavior Change Lab. So he's a guru when it comes to actually getting you to implement things and change your
Hmm.
behavior. So the smallest
Right.
part of the report is telling you about your DNA. Here's what we say about your genes. But the bigger part is, what do I do about this? If
Right.
it's saying that I can't sleep at night because my circadian rhythm is broken, my internal clock doesn't work
Hmm.
properly, right? That's one
Hmm.
reason. There's multiple reasons why you may not be able to sleep at night, but this is one of the big ones. So that's going to give you recommendations that when you read them, they seem so obvious that you're kind of like, I knew that. Yeah, but you're not doing it, right? That's why we're telling you, here's what you need
Right.
to do, which
Right.
is
Right.
your circadian rhythm is broken, which means you probably should be off screens 2 hours before bed because that blue light mimics sunlight and your brain
Right.
doesn't release melatonin because it doesn't know it's nighttime, right? What did
Right.
our ancestors do? Our ancestors were in the dark in the evening and they saw the amber glow of fire. At nighttime, they
Hmm.
all looked at fire. So that amber glow is what actually triggers the release of all the melatonin that you made during the day to put you to sleep. So for some people, we recommend that they wear amber lenses at night because they
Oh,
don't
interesting.
release the melatonin properly, right? And that one
Huh.
thing, even if you take a melatonin pill, not going to help you because your body's not doing anything with it. So this one hack for one person is the thing that could fix their sleep, which prevents cancer, which prevents cardiovascular problems, what gets their libido up, which gets their hormones levels up. That one little thing is maybe all they needed.
Huh. Amber glasses.
Yeah, because literally we are genetically wired to be reacting to the amber glow of fire at night. That deep amber glow,
Huh.
that's what releases melatonin. And when you're instead watching Netflix with beautiful pot lights
Hmm.
in your all that
Right.
instead,
Right. Right.
again,
Yeah.
if your circadian rhythm is good, it doesn't matter because your body does a good job of fighting it.
Right.
It's for the people that
Right.
genetically don't do that process so well, they can't cope with not having the amber glow of fire to trigger the melatonin.
And you're able to see that through DNA?
Yeah. Yeah,
Huh.
man.
So can you tell that the rhythm's off, or you can just say, okay, if they're experiencing this, then here's, or you're specifically saying, okay, you're missing the gene, or you're weak in this area, so you're probably
We studied the genomes. We know a lot more about what the genes mean, right? So this gene is not
right.
just BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It determines neuroplasticity. How
Okay.
well do you develop neural connections in the brain, right? So that's not all it means. It also regulates your circadian rhythm. And then we learned this by studying those 7,000 people. Then we know if somebody's circadian rhythm is broken, for the 20% that succeeded, that didn't end up with a sleep problem, what were they doing?
Mm.
Right? And some of them were biohackers that would wear amber lenses. And then we would study, well, why did that work? And then we would figure
Right.
out the reason it worked is because if you look at the anthropology of it, the history, this is what was required for melatonin release, not production. Melatonin production is a whole other problem. So there's some people that can't sleep because their vitamin D pathways are off. And you would say, well, what
Mm.
the hell does that have to do with sleep? Vitamin D is like for
Mhm.
bone and immunity. You
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
22,000 genes in your body, 2,000 require vitamin D to function. So it's actually
Wow.
a hormone. It's my belief is we call it a vitamin because if everybody had enough, there'd be a lot less disease. So it's been rebranded as something a little less significant. It's actually a hormone
Right.
that triggers 10% of your human biochemistry, including your circadian clock. And it may be that your BDNF is great, but your vitamin D is off. So if you
Right.
don't step outside in the morning and get sunlight and take high dose vitamin D, you're not going to sleep well that night because your sleep clock starts from the minute you wake up. Your wake up
Mm.
habits will determine how well you fall asleep at night. Right. So
Mhm.
these are all the things we learned from studying all these people, which we now put into the reports to teach. Another whole process, serotonin. Serotonin is known as a mood regulating
Right.
neurochemical. You produce it
Yeah.
in your gut, and it's supposed to cause you to balance your reaction. It also does something else that's not spoken of, which is it makes it difficult for your brain, if you had the bad version, to prioritize stimulus. The
Mm.
people that are
Mhm.
like, stop chewing the
Mhm.
food, I can't concentrate, or like that clock is
Mhm.
ticking, I can't be in this room, or like you're crumpling the
Right.
paper, I don't know what. So they get distracted easily, they get irritated easily because they can't
Yes.
focus and they can't prioritize stimulus. Like I'm talking to you right now, if somebody walks in the room, I
Mhm.
shouldn't even notice, right?
Right.
Those people, it's like, shut down, what are you doing, I can't. So anyways, those same people are the people that maybe don't have a problem falling asleep, but once they're asleep, they struggle staying asleep. Because
Mm.
when you're under that blanket, the temperature changes. And then the hubby
Mm.
pulls on the
Mhm.
blanket. And then there's a weird noise outside, right? And then there's a smell because somebody's doing something, whatever, right? Any
Right.
stimulus, the brain knows that in the second half of the sleep, at some point, I'm supposed to wake up. And just like the
Right.
amber glow of fire is what triggers the go to sleep, the light amber glow through the eyelids of sunlight is what's
Mhm.
supposed to trigger wake up, right?
Right.
It's waiting for that stimulant, but because you can't prioritize it, it's reacting to every stimulant. And the
Mm.
biggest one is
Mhm.
probably temperature, head to toe. Your skin feels everything, and so that disrupts sleep. So you can get very precise on I can't sleep is not a good enough answer. Why you? Your why is very different than the other two reasons, and there's 10 different reasons.
Wow. Hmm.
Yeah,
And my DNA is going to tell me specifically why, which one of those 10, or which two of the 10, or three of the 10, or however
sure.
many of the 10 that I'm probably having issues with, right?
Exactly, and what to do about it
Is that
because the
accurate?
solution isn't the same. Like some things, here's a supplement you need. Some things I have on my mattress a mattress cooler because my serotonin
Oh.
is completely off. So what does it do?
Mhm.
I can still enjoy the weight and comfort of the heavy blanket, which again,
Mhm.
sensorially, I need that, but I don't want to
Right.
overheat. So from the bottom, I'm staying cool with this, like it's a very thin mattress cooler, which just has cold water
Mhm.
flowing through it. And so I
Mm.
never reach that, I never leave the ideal temperature zone, which is one
Got it.
reason why I would wake up, which I used to struggle a lot with. And I didn't understand why. I just thought that I had energy. It wasn't energy. I couldn't stay asleep.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And so these are, from the way I'm hearing it, these are like, well, just ways to run your system more efficiently, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's not,
Yeah.
this isn't,
We're
I
saying
mean,
that,
we're using very technical, like great science, but ultimately we're saying, take this great science and distill it down and say, to your point about the amber glasses, oh, I have to wear amber glasses, or in your case, oh, I have to be a certain temperature, otherwise that's why I'm waking up all the time. It's not that I'm um, yeah, it's not that I have extra energy, or it's not that I'm, was your circadian rhythm then off, or is that different than the
mine
sleeping? I
is
mean, than
good.
the
Yeah. My circadian rhythm is good. So jet lag for me
Is
isn't
that
so bad a
right?
problem, right? So I didn't
Huh.
so this is why we deal with things symptomatically. So I didn't have in my mind a sleep problem because I had no problem falling
Uh,
asleep. In fact, you sit me down
right.
anywhere, so you can turn this thing off. If I don't go on to something, I'm going to sleep, right? It's
Right.
just that I
Right.
can't stay asleep, so I just thought I didn't need as much.
Ah.
But do that
Right.
until your 50s. Say goodbye
Right.
to your libido. Say goodbye to your heart. Say hello to cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say goodbye to muscle retention and mass, the things that you need for
Right.
aging, healthy aging, right? So sleep is so important. There's lymphatic drainage, your body's ability to detoxify. Most of your detoxification happens during your sleep. There's also
Hmm.
something called lymphatic drainage, where your brain actually
Mm-hmm.
detoxifies and it sends out things from your brain back down into the lymphatic system to get rid of it, right? So if you don't
Right.
get enough good quality sleep, not just hours, but quality, you're not doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
That's another reason for cognitive decline. That's another path. So somebody's particular path to Alzheimer's dementia may be their sleep, which for someone else it's
Right.
pollution, for someone else it's sugar, and there's so many different reasons, right?
Yeah. Extremely interesting. Well, very cool. Well, is there anything that we didn't hit on? There's so much we could do. Probably a show for 2 or 3 days just on all of the ways, right? I mean, seriously, we could just start with like, okay, we're going to take mood disorders and we're going to unpack that. We're going to
Yeah,
take weight loss, but it sounds to some degree like that's what you did, like with the
that's exactly what we
portal
did.
is uh, right. Is basically you just addressed all these things, and then people can go in and kind of look and see. Um, to your point, how are they linked up? I think I'd just have to see it to understand exactly how it works. But it sounds like basically it's an instruction manual with how-to videos, which are good for me because reading. I'm learning to love reading, but it's still a process. And videos obviously are super easy. You just plug them in
Yeah,
and
and
go,
you go. Yeah.
right?
So
Or
yeah, it is.
in this case, you said podcast, so it's just audio.
There's three things. There's your gene results are read to you through audio. There is some video
Uh-huh.
to help you rethink the problem. Meaning, when it comes to
Got it.
mood and behavior, we don't believe in things like ADHD, anxiety, depression, right? For
Okay.
most of those things, there's a less than 10% of us that actually have a problem, right? I
Hmm.
have depression. I have a chemical imbalance that leads me, and they're
Hmm.
going to be the most acute. Like you know who they are.
Right.
90% of us, and this is actually literally the numbers as we look at people, it's around 90% of us don't have an innate problem. We are wired for one thing and we're doing another. And now we all of a sudden express a problem. I'll give you an example. My dopamine pathway. So, dopamine is the chemical that allows you to feel pleasure and it allows you to
Mm-hmm.
feel reward, right? So, I
Mm-hmm.
eat something tasty or I achieve something at work. Both of those things require dopamine. So, the way I experience dopamine is the gene that determines how much I bind is very low.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
experientially, it's way down here. The gene that breaks it down and gets rid of it is super fast. So I feel it way down here and it lasts for far too little time, which means
Mm-hmm.
that I just don't
Mm.
get the sense of pleasure or reward that other people do. So I have three
Right.
potential outcomes: depression,
Mm-hmm.
because I just, life sucks, right? That's one option.
Right.
Addiction, because I go down the pleasure route and I start doing more and
Right.
more and more until I finally kill myself. Or achievement,
Right.
because I go down the reward route and I start taking risks and doing stupid things that other people wouldn't do, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
did as an entrepreneur. I walked
Mm-hmm.
away from my past company to build the DNA company because I just felt it was so impactful when I had no business doing so, right? So, yeah. So now your context drives the
Mhm.
outcome, because guess what? I've experienced all three. I've been depressed,
Right.
I've been addicted,
Mhm.
and I've achieved, because I,
Right.
in three different parts of my life, I had three very different contexts for which this either superpower or crutch expressed differently. And for most people
Right.
that have anxiety problems, addiction, burnout, procrastination problems, anxiety, like all the stuff that we deal with, that's why is it that there's so much more mood and behavior and mental health issues post COVID than there was before? We didn't change
Mhm.
overnight. The context drew it out of us. We
Right.
were locked down. We didn't see our family. We didn't eat properly. We didn't get sunlight, right? So the
Mhm.
context, the stressor of constantly worrying, that context was the environment, nutrition, lifestyle load, which in this particular case, it's lifestyle, that was too much. So
Mm.
most of those areas, that's a big one, I think can be unpacked, where that same thing that is a burden to you is probably your superpower. You're just in the wrong
Right.
place.
And expand that thought. your
So
burden, which we talk about a lot on the show. So your burden is probably your superpower. What do you mean by that?
yeah. So going back to my dopamine pathway, the same thing that caused me to experience depression in my 30s is now causing me to be a high performance entrepreneur in my 40s. It's the same biochemical pathway, the inability to feel pleasure and reward. I could either just
Hmm.
do nothing, where my default is depression, right? Because life
Right.
sucks. Or I could use it to seek
Mm-hmm.
reward and make the decisions that my teammates won't make because it's too risky, but I'm willing to do it because what's not risky isn't
Mm-hmm.
good enough for me, right? So I do that. So that's one
Right.
example. Another example is going back to serotonin, the thing that we said that prioritizes stimulus. So it could be this
Mm-hmm.
crutch where like everything bothers you, every little detail, you can't work in teams because everybody's annoying, right? And you have trouble with the family because everybody is asking you too many questions and making too much noise. That's the crutch. Or if you were an analyst or a hedge fund manager that had to catch it, or a lawyer that had to catch every little T and I that needed to be
Detail.
dotted and
Right.
crossed, right? Your ability to see detail and experience the world in a high level of detail that other people can't, that's your superpower, right? But if that's not
Right.
what you're doing, if you're working behind a cashier desk and just being annoyed by people and then walking away and quitting every job because you're not doing what you're designed for. And when it comes to mood and behavior, most of us have superpowers that we're wired for. It's whatever we got from our ancestors, whatever they dealt with. We're wired to do that.
Right.
But we're not doing it. We're all doing the same thing, right? For the most part. So
Right.
if you understand that freed me a lot. It freed me up in terms of, and we've done this with our whole team. You know, our whole executive team, right down to the front end person on the phone. They
Mm-hmm.
understand that here's my genome, and even when we're building our teams, the way people work together,
Mm-hmm.
the friction that used to be there, me, the low dopamine fast clearance, my co-founder has the maximum ability to experience dopamine and the slowest possible clearance. Complete polar
Mm-hmm.
opposite of me. So what does that look like?
Right.
Me, leave a meeting, go, 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 go. We're not sleeping until it's done. Him, leave a meeting,
Right.
yeah, 10 action items. He's on Facebook looking for vacations and talking to his friends, right? It's so easy for him to experience pleasure. There's no drive.
Right.
But
Right.
when it comes to the thing that he feels that elevated sense of reward, he binges and he'll
Mm.
dive deep. So he's more like the subject matter expert. Give me the thing that I like.
Right.
And I'll 10
Right.
hours, I'll disappear and I'll come back with a stack of paper like this. For me, it's like surface level on everything, but I got to see progress everywhere, right?
Right.
Now we
Right.
know how
Right.
to work together. Now we're a perfect team. Before we used to fight in every meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, so many applications. Well, thank you for coming on today. How do so it's like the DNAcompany.com is right, the name of the website, obviously. That's pretty straightforward. And we talked pre-show that for the listeners, we'll do the DNAcompany.com/BriteVibe, BriteVibe, and you'll put some kind of discount on there for our viewers and our listeners, right? Or something
Yes.
special. I don't know what you talked about.
Yeah,
Something special. So I don't know
we'll
what
get
that is.
you a promo discount on that, and thank you for giving us your time and listening. We appreciate it, and we love talking to people and helping you learn, but we also want to give you something back. So use the promo code. Don't buy retail.
We do appreciate that. I'm going to go out and try it because it's so interesting. So yeah, thank you for coming on. And certainly as things progress, we always invite our guests to come back on and share more insights, more, here's what's happening, here's what's evolving. It's really cool to hear that you're working with Heather, because I literally talk to her almost on a weekly basis now, either through email or conversation. And so we'll have to dive more into that as we go. In fact, I'll bring this up to her. Some of the stuff that we want to do protocol wise. So such a small, interesting world. So thank you so much. Reach out if you have more. If people have questions, they just still go to that website and they can submit questions, I'm sure, or comments.
Sure. I mean, I don't even mind. Email me directly. I'm here to talk. So it's my first name, Kashif, Kashif at thednacompany.com. It is me. I'm the guy answering the email. So go ahead and connect if you'd like.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your information. And thank you also for putting it because I've heard you talk before and I know you can get very technical. So thank you for keeping it relatable and keeping it something that we can understand and actually, like, how do we apply it? I think so many times people who are really smart have a hard time saying, okay, well, this is why it matters to you, right? As a human being. I think you did an excellent job today of helping us understand why it matters, even though I know you know the science and the code and all this stuff. I think for most people, they just want to know, what do I need to do to get the result I want? Yeah, thank you for helping keep that very relatable. And we wish the DNA company the best, and we look forward to following your journey as it continues to grow.
Thank you. It was awesome being with you.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.